But that being said, it's a pleasure to see you all. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put this into G-Pose because I actually prefer a very minimalist UI setting. That way it's less distracting for you all, and we can focus on the conversation of today's panel. So let me go ahead, find my converse emote, and as you can see, they've even been kind enough to prepare me a cup of coffee. So I think we're ready to begin. Alright, so welcome to today's panel. The title, as you already know, is You Already Roleplay, You Just Don't Know It Yet. This is a bit of a play on words from that line from Fist of the North Star of You're Already Dead. I know, a little bit morbid to start this with, but please forgive me. Now, before we begin, I'd like to ask you all a favor. Take a minute, make sure you're comfortable. We're going to be together for the next hour, so you deserve to be as comfy as possible. Get a snack, get a blanket, do whatever you need to do. If you're listening to this later on YouTube or Spotify, then you have kind of an unfair advantage. You could pause right now and go get yourself something. But if you need time, we're just going over basic introductions. Who I am, what this panel is about. So don't feel too bad if you need to miss that in order to get comfortable. Now, to start with, who am I and why am I doing this panel? Well, I go by Nobutaka, but that tends to be a bit long, so feel free to just call me Nobu. I've been playing Final Fantasy XIV since 2.0 to 2.2. After a decade, admittedly, things get a little blurry in terms of time. But when it comes to role-playing, I've been role-playing pretty much since I started in Final Fantasy XIV. Now, some of you have no idea who I am, and that's fine. Some of you may recognize me from Coffee and Carbuncles, as you can see here in the bottom right. It's a podcast that I host on YouTube and Spotify, and I try and introduce everyone to various members of the 14 community and various subgroups of the 14 community. For instance, I just got done interviewing the owners of Eorzea Collection and the Market Universalis app. I've also interviewed one of the hosts from this year, Synodic Scribe, and I'd say my most well-known interview is probably where I interviewed my friend Lysenia about role-playing as a Garlean. So, let's get into the bulk of why we're here, shall we? What is role-playing? Now, a lot of you have probably heard the abbreviation RP, and obviously that just stands for role-playing, but what is role-playing? A very succinct definition of role-playing is to act or perform that part of a person or a character. In many ways, it's what you're doing right now simply by being in Final Fantasy XIV. Literally by playing 14, by moving around your avatar, in many ways, that is role-playing. But when it comes to role-playing, several layers of role-playing exist, different types of role-play, based on how in-depth you want to go. Now, just from logging in and hitting things as your character, that's roleplay. But if you also want to have full conversations as your character, that's roleplay. Or if you don't want to have anything like that, if you just want to go, hey, I have this really pretty character and I'm going to go around and beat things up as them, that's less roleplay focused, but again, by virtue of being in 14, you are role-playing. I'm obviously not a white and pink-haired guy from Doma and a summoner, but I roleplay one through this character. Though, there is an issue with roleplay in our community, and by that I mean the wider 14-player base, where we seem to have this misconception about roleplay that leads to people having very negative opinions of it. And part of what I want to do today is help to dispel some of that opinion, go over some of the reasons that people might not like roleplay, and hopefully even convince some of you to try it out for yourselves. So I think the best way that we can do this is actually with a little bit of roleplay ourselves. Which brings me to what I think is the best part of this presentation. My name is Jeff, and I hate role-playing. First off, apologies to anyone named Jeff. I promise I'm not targeting you, but if your name is Jeff and you hate role-playing, well, good news! This presentation is for you. Now, if your name isn't Jeff and you also hate role-playing, this presentation's for you too, but not as focused. So, why do people, for instance, Jeff, have a stigma towards roleplay? Well, part of that, unfortunately, is a place that many of you have heard about, but may or may not be familiar with. That's right. Hello, Quicksand's Catgirls. Unfortunately, people like Jeff get ideas from places like the old Quicksands or YouTubers who decide to cover some more of the mature roleplay aspects of Final Fantasy XIV and the roleplay community. And just like with any group, unfortunately, the more controversial, the less savory aspects of anything is what most people hear about and then go, well, that must be what all of this is. And essentially, you're trying to cover a very wide, very unique array of the 14 community with just one simple label of, well, is it roleplay? Then clearly they must mean adult roleplay. And I'm here to tell you that is definitely only the case about 5% of the time. In most instances, that isn't really the essence of what roleplay is and what we mean in the 14 roleplay community. But let's go back to what I said earlier, shall we? The interesting thing about Jeff is he's heard nasty things about roleplay, but he's already roleplaying. I want you to imagine that our friend Jeff is actually a max height, purple-skinned aura. Now, in real life, does Jeff have purple skin? Is he actually, IRL, a tall purple scaly boy with horns on his head? No. No, unfortunately, he isn't. But no worries, Jeff. I'm here to help you live out what you don't realize might be your dreams. So, how should I get started, you might ask? How does one begin to roleplay? And also, how does Jeff stop the bias towards roleplay? Well, the best thing that we can do is try it for ourselves. You'll find that a lot of the time, misconceptions and negative ideas towards things usually come from either a lack of experience or a lack of understanding. So the best thing we can do to better understand part of the 14 community is involve ourselves in that part of the community before we make a judgment about it. Now, when it comes to roleplay, there are a lot of places you can start, and one of the things that you can do is you can craft a backstory. Now, to be clear, you don't need a backstory for your character, but depending on how long you've played that character, or just by virtue of the job they chose in 14, or the race you chose for them in 14, you may already have a backstory for them in your head. For instance, a backstory can be as complex as you having an idea of their parents, what happened to their parents, how they got to Ul'dah or Limsa, or a backstory can just be as simple as my character happens to be a cat boy from Ul'dah, and his adventure starts where A Realm Reborn picks up. What I'm trying to get at is a backstory is nice, and it does help to flesh out your character later, but it's not necessary. But let's get a bit more in depth. Let's talk about what is more necessary for RP, and that's a personality. Now, a personality can be specifically a personality you craft for your character. It might be a lot different from your own. It might be the same as your own. But a good way that you can make a personality is either, first off, you base it on yourself or someone you know, or you can base it on normal character archetypes. You could have a character that's a stalwart defender of justice, or a character that's a very shy mage. That's up to you. But to help, I've crafted 3 very simple questions. First off, ask yourself, how old is my character? And this can be a specific age. You could say 25, 37, whatever. Or it could be a general age range. You could be like, well, they're a teenager, or they're an adult, or an elder. Just to get an idea, a sense of how long they've been alive. Now, for some races in 14, such as the Elezen, this may be a little bit more difficult than others, but do your best. Question 2, what part of the planet are they from? Now, normally you would think, well, where are they from in Eorzea, which of the 3 city-states? But obviously, throughout our time in 14, we've expanded quite a bit. We have our primary area of Eorzea, we've gone out east, we've gone out west, we've gone to even other reflections. So really, your character could be from anywhere, or they could even be from places that we haven't been to in 14 yet. If you want to say they're from some far off island we don't know about, or a whole nother plane that we don't know about, that's completely fine. And the third question is, how is their temperament? Is your character generally calm? Is your character generally aggressive? Are they shy, or are they pretty outgoing? And to go back over these 3 questions, we have how old are they, where are they from, and what is their temperament? And I feel these are very important because a 32-year-old from Tural with an aggressive temperament is going to act and behave considerably different from, say, a 17-year-old from Limsa who tends to be very relaxed and even possibly apathetic about the world around them. Now, once you've crafted a backstory, once you've crafted a personality, there's something very important I need to mention. All of that can be thrown out the window anytime you want. Everything with a character is subject to change, and that is completely fine. It might surprise anyone you're role-playing with, so you should probably explain first. But this is your character, and you want to be as comfortable playing this character as possible. So if you decide later, hey, I want my character to be from this part of the world, or due to events perhaps in the MSQ, their personality and temperament has changed, that's completely fine. It's your character and it's your creative expression. What really matters is that you have fun with it. So now that we have this character, how do I actually start role playing? Because we've talked about setting up a role play, we've talked about why people might not like role play, but how do I actually role play? So starting out, you might be a little nervous, and to help with that, the best advice I can give you is try a test run with a friend. Grab someone that you have a lot of fun hanging out with in 14, invite them to, say, party chat, and then try and speak to them with the voice of this character you've crafted. And if you're uncertain still of aspects of your character, I recommend looking at things like lore books or job quests, or a wonderful website called thekweh.com, TheKweh.com. They have some pretty wonderful character building and roleplay guides on there. But as I was saying, in order to really get used to your character, maybe try out different personalities for them, the best thing you can do is just join a party chat with a friend. That way it's a private chat. No one else has to see it if you're worried about people judging your character. And hopefully together, you and your friend can settle on personalities, maybe not even just for your character, but for theirs as well. Role-playing is considerably more fun with friends, so I recommend you and perhaps a free company mate get together and you're like, let's try role-playing, and let's try making backstories and personalities for our characters together. Now, where do people roleplay at? Well, now's a good time to discuss the roleplay tag in 14. I know that seems a weird place to start, but bear with me here. If you go to your party search info and edit your search info, there are various tags you can use. For instance, looking for meld or busy, and one of them says roleplay. So let's pretend, let's roleplay, if you will, that you've gone ahead and you've put that tag on. And now that we've done that, as I said, the easiest place to start, if you're nervous, is in party chat. Just put on your roleplay tag, go adventure with your friends, and in party chat, you might defeat a monster and then decide, all right, how would my character react to this? So imagine that in real life, you might be relatively quiet, but you've crafted this character that is very outgoing, very outspoken, very loud, and so you and your friend maybe clear a dungeon, and you go into party chat or you go into shout chat, since dungeons are instances and no one else will be able to read what you put, and in all caps, you're just like, heck yeah, we did it, with like 7 exclamation points. That's awesome, because just then you took your very first step in role playing. But if you're looking for a particular location, consider natural gathering places in game. For instance, the Aetheryte hubs in the various city-states, or perhaps the Drowning Winch in Limsa. Now, here, it's a bit more common to see people using say chat as opposed to party chat, but again, this is about your comfort level. So if you're not quite ready to publicly roleplay, then don't feel bad about sticking to party chat. Or if it's with your free company members, use free company chat. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're feeling a bit more bold or want to place with other RPers, consider venues. This is a venue. Most cafes are venues. You may be RPing, or the owner of the venue may be RPing, or both, or neither. Some venues are very lore observant, others are just casual and for fun. some ideas of venues that you'll find might be cafes. They've become very common on all servers in 14. You might find clubs, which my advice with that is please make sure to read the description of the club before you attend. You'll find that in this game there is a large mix of more adult roleplay oriented clubs and more casual clubs. So please make sure that you always stick with your comfort level on that. Other ideas of venues, though, might be events or parties out in the world. People might be like, hey, we're going to gather at the Drowning Winch to throw a party for this player. Throw on your RP tag and go to it and just see what happens. Have fun with it. Now, beyond that, there are non-venue player-hosted events. For instance, like I said, you have the Drowning Winch, where you'll occasionally find parties. Other ideas or other things like this, as you may have actually seen over the past 3 days, is right here at this con. You'll find that if you go to pretty much anywhere in this convention, you'll find people with roleplay tags on and role-playing in Say Chat. And that's totally fine. That's a way to do it. You could get into Say Chat, you could have your RP tag on, you could go up to someone who your character would think looks really cool, and then just in Say Chat be like, hey, you look awesome. No one will ever be offended or upset about a compliment of how their character looks. I promise you, either in Say Chat or Tell or even Shout Chat, should you want to get that bold, but please not here because it's specifically for the staff, you will find that people love being complimented on their aesthetic. So go ahead and dive in and feel free to do it that way. Now, before we do that, though, I know that I've made it sound like you should be bold and you should go out into the world and just start role-playing. And I think you should. I absolutely think you should. But before you do that... Oh, nope, that is the wrong slide. Oh no, where is it? There we go. Okay, sorry about that. That is the fun of doing this live. Sometimes things get out of order. Let's talk about roleplay etiquette. Alright, so we've talked about the roleplay tag. Now, there are a few other things that I want to go over. So, we've talked about the roleplay tag. Another part of being polite is using quotes when you're speaking in character, or using parentheses when you speak out of character. And this is to help people sort of stay in the mind frame of roleplay, but also to help them understand when you're saying something as your character versus saying something as you yourself. For instance, you might have been speaking with someone in character, hopefully using quotations when you speak, and then you quickly have to go and use the restroom, or you have to stop and log out for the day. That would be a really good time to put that in parentheses and be like, hey, I need to go. Another way you can do this is put OOC, which means out of character, and then what you have to say. And this can help distinguish between something that you're using to break character and something that your character is saying. Now, a neat trick that some of you might not be aware of is /EM. And what's neat about this is that if you put /EM and then write something like makes waffles, what'll happen is the game will put your character's name, and then it will put whatever you just did in Say Chat. Keep in mind, Everyone can see this, so be considerate of that when you're doing this. Be careful about what you're putting. But for instance, if I put /em makes some delicious waffles, then it will say in Say Chat, Nobutaka makes some delicious waffles. And this can be really fun, especially when you're out and about in the world. Now, back to more etiquette-focused things. One thing to keep in mind is part of 14's story is that your character is the Warrior of Light. This is a kind of touchy subject in role-playing, because it comes down to either everyone is the Warrior of Light or no one is. And what I mean by that is if you walk into a venue or you decide to roleplay with friends and you tell them, well, I'm the Warrior of Light from the MSQ, it gets rid of a sense of casualness for the roleplay. It also may feel in some circles as though, excuse me, as though you're putting yourself above other people's characters. So what I would recommend in this situation is throw the Warrior of Light title out the window. When I'm role-playing with others, what I'll usually do is we'll basically act as if the Warrior of Light title is more an honorary thing, like our entire free company is together considered the quote-unquote Warrior of Light, or all adventurers. Like, it's more of a concept than a title given to a single person. Someone just said in chat, we're all just adventurers deep inside, and that is brilliant. Honestly, I couldn't have put it better. Really, if you just pretend like your character is kind of a normal adventurer, then you'll find that your RPs go a lot smoother. Now, to be fair, you can have that be part of your character's personality, that they either strive to be or want to be or consider themselves the Warrior of Light, but I wouldn't go so far as to say, hey, my character is definitely the Warrior of Light. That's generally considered kind of rude. So, we've talked about roleplay, and at this point, you've learned etiquette. Now, maybe you've been to a venue, maybe you've been to this convention, maybe you've tried roleplay, and you're like, hey, I really like this. That weird guy with the hair was right. So, now what? Well, good news. You have a ton of options. First off, there's Party Finder in the game, where, like I said, you can find events being advertised, you can find clubs being advertised. Go and live your in-character best life. But there are tons of other places as well. You could go to online forums. There are a lot of places online. I've seen dedicated Final Fantasy XIV or just broader Final Fantasy RP forums that you can bring your 14 character into. And that's always really fun if you enjoy writing and you enjoy more long-form roleplay. Then I definitely recommend just going to some search engine, typing in Final Fantasy XIV RP forum, and seeing what pops up. You can also go to Discord groups. There, if you look around, you will find plenty of Final Fantasy XIV roleplay Discords. Some of them might veer a little bit more into adult roleplay, so, you know, again, with clubs, be a little careful about where you decide to check out, depending on what you're after in terms of roleplay. But with that being said, Discord is a very solid place to look. Also, in the game itself, you can find dedicated roleplay free companies. And these are really fun, either to join in full or even just make friends with some people who are part of roleplay free companies. Because at least with this group of people, you know, if you ever want to roleplay or you need advice on roleplaying, you've found your people. Cross-world link shells, standard link shells, also a good way to go. Maybe when you log in, just send a message there going, hey, would anyone like to come to my server and roleplay with me? Or maybe the link shell when you log in, or the RP free company, is already having an ongoing conversation in character, in which case put what you want to say in parentheses and just dive in. The neat thing about this is that you don't need to have your RP tag up because this isn't something that you're doing in public. And what I should have mentioned earlier, and I apologize, is that is why that RP tag is important, because if you're doing roleplay, especially in public, you want people to know that you're roleplaying. You don't want to just have them think that out of character you're going around with your Grahatia Catboy shouting about how much the Warrior of Light will love you now that you slayed this monster. I know, that's a specific example, but I've seen it. So, just remember, when it comes to roleplay, there are all types of roleplay, all types of venues. Metaphorically, you can go as deep into the roleplay swimming pool as you want. Shallow and casual roleplay, completely fine. Deep in, full backstory, character arcs, plotting, go for it. I've seen people who will put maybe 2 lines in character just to try out a concept, and that's completely fine. And clear on the other end of the spectrum, I've seen people, for instance, Garlean role players, who will take 3 hours out of their day to have a full roleplay of the Garlean Senate, all in character, with one of the best decorated houses I've ever seen. So really, it's just up to you and what you want to do with it. And even if you're someone who either is just starting RP or has never RP'd and you're like, full 3-hour roleplay session couldn't be me. Well, I said the same thing when I started, and here I am now giving an hour-long convention speech about it. So be careful about that. You never know where you'll end up, but I promise it'll be a fun journey. So just allow yourself to go on that journey. Ultimately, roleplay is all about having fun. The moment you or your partners are getting uncomfortable, fun's over, roleplay's over. And I want to talk about that briefly because I feel like that is a big part of the community bias towards roleplaying, is a lack of understanding when it comes to, I'm roleplaying, I've found myself in what I consider to be a very uncomfortable situation, and now I don't think I can get out of it, or I don't know how to get out of it. The best advice I can give you is, if you are role-playing and you feel uncomfortable, leave. Just turn around, take off your RP tag, leave. No one in Final Fantasy XIV can stop you from leaving a building or logging out. And so if you decide, I'm going to go check out a club that maybe I'm not sure I'm ready for, and you feel uncomfortable, leave the club. If you're RPing with someone and they take the roleplay in a direction that you find yourself feeling uncomfortable with, tell them that you don't wish to continue the RP and leave. And if they harass you, block them. Literally, nothing can make you do anything in 14 that you don't want to do. Unless you're in roulette and somehow you end up in a dungeon that you don't like. In which case, again, just leave. Leave the dungeon. It's fine. All right. So we have a bit more time than I thought we would. So I do want to go ahead and add a few things real quick. A few notes about RPing that kind of goes back to etiquette, but kind of covers all of this. First off, someone is not their character. The more you get into roleplay in 14, the more important this becomes. And I know what you're thinking, but Nobu, obviously the 6 Grahatias here hanging out with me in Limsa aren't actually Grahatia. Well, yes, that is a good point. But bear with me for a minute. So let's say that there's someone who is at an RP venue and they've decided to make their character a heel, or in a more common term, a villain. And you're like, wow, I really hate this person's personality. I hate the way they're antagonizing me. I just do not like this whatsoever. It's important here to kind of think, well, is this actually the individual, or is it the personality they've crafted for their character? A good way to resolve this is out of character or in a tell, go, hey, I'm not necessarily comfortable with this, or hey, when you said this, did you mean this in character or out of character? Consider seeking clarification. But again, even before or after clarification, if you're not comfortable, just leave. It's the best advice I can give you. When it comes to roleplay venues, when a venue closes, try not to hang around too long. Honestly, a lot of venues will be like, hey, if we're closing, but if you guys want to hang around for a little bit, go ahead. But keep in mind that depending on how long the venue's been open that day, those poor people are probably tired. They've been probably in character helping people, dealing with questions all day. And so if you want to wrap something up, do that, but try not to overstay your welcome too much, okay? Just to help be more polite. And finally, I'm going to be a bit of an old man about this as someone who's been online for a while. As with anything online, your happiness and also your safety are a top priority, so please don't give out personal information, especially not to randos in roleplay. I mean, if you decide that you want to do that, that's completely fine. But unless they're like a really close friend, I really wouldn't give out any personal information. Also, if you do, definitely make sure you're not in Say Chat, because that can get very, very awkward. But as Skitty has said here, in the RP community, if they truly are there to have fun and partake in a great hobby, they will communicate, and no questions are dumb questions. And thank you, Skitty, because that is beautiful. The roleplay community, whether you're a Garlean roleplayer, whether you're roleplaying as the Warrior of Light destined to save Eorzea, whether you're roleplaying as just some random person from Alamigo that maybe wants to make their living as an alchemist, no matter what, role-playing is about fun and communication. And if you're with someone and the RP is going in a direction you don't like, or things are getting uncomfortable, talk and resolve things. And I should have had this in the RP etiquette part of this, but something that can go a very long way in helping with this is before the RP even properly starts, speak with your RP partner or roleplay partners and go, what's sort of the expectation for this? Are we just going to a dungeon in character and calling it good? Are we going to go hang out at this nightclub on a particular server and do that in character? Sort of figure out what is the plan for this roleplay session and go forward from there. Because if you go in with a plan, if you've coordinated and talked about this, you can avoid so many issues later on because you've already figured out this is what we're doing. Again, everything's subject to change. So you might go, we're going to go do this one dungeon in character, and that may end up being, we're going to go through all of our dailies together in character and then maybe go to a club. Totally fine. I hope you have fun with it. But just keep in mind that conversation, communication, and planning will go a very long way. Now, I'm going to ask if anyone has any questions, but please, before you ask, keep in mind that, as you can see, I've set up a very minimalist UI. So if you have questions, I can't see them in game. So I'm going to ask that you go ahead and ask the question in the stream chat. I'll repeat the question and I'll answer it. If you don't feel comfortable asking the question in stream chat, then you can feel free to come to me after, and we can talk in tells, or you could message me on social media, or Skitty is offering right now to, if you put a question in game, then Skitty will put it here on Twitch chat for me. Also, 6000, you're right. Sometimes improv is fun, but communication is so crucial. It will avoid messy situations. Yeah, 100%. So Remix Sakura asks, what's some etiquette for RPing out of game, such as Discord or Tumblr? Now, personally, I don't actually know a lot about Tumblr roleplay, so unfortunately, I'm not able to answer that part very well. When it comes to Discord roleplay, though, I would say that especially what we put about parentheses, and making sure to distinguish in and out of character, I'm going to go ahead and say that applies to any form of text-based roleplay, regardless of if it's in-game or on another medium. But also, try and, if it's on something like Discord, then understand that if someone says, hey, out of character, I need to go, they will likely get back to you when they can. But even though you have the ability to message them out of character and be like, hey, can we start role-playing again? Please don't use this too much, because even if you're really into the roleplay, you may not know that person's specific situation, IRL, and you don't really want to pester them. Or perhaps they are not necessarily as into the roleplay as you might be and aren't really sure how to communicate that. So what I would say is, if you're roleplaying on Discord, understand that even though you may see the person online, they may or may not get back to that roleplay at their own discretion. Now, if a considerable amount of time has gone by and you haven't heard from them, maybe send them a message and be like, hey, are you still interested in this roleplay? And then carry on from there. But try and be a little considerate in regards to maybe asking someone about a role-playing process. Morgana asks, what is your favorite part of roleplay? My favorite part of roleplay is how extremely creative people get with their backstory. I am always so impressed by how people manage to go about crafting these really incredible backstories. It occurs to me, and I'm really glad that we have 14 minutes left. I actually have a bit of a problem. I left out part of my speech, and I'm sorry. I am going to answer Coffee Drop's question, and then we're going to backtrack a little bit. But I thank you all for still being here because I left out a very important part. But Coffee Drop says, how would you suggest dealing with wanting to change something about your character that affects someone else's character, say a past event that they experienced together? That is a very good question. So what I would say is communicate with that person and go, this is what happened, this is what I want to change, and this is why. Now, in most instances, if you and your roleplay partner are getting along well and you've had this roleplay and you're like, let's change canon, they will probably go along with it. Or they may go, hey, could we change maybe this but not that? And so the best advice I can give in that situation is if you want to change something that involves someone else's character, just talk to them. Maybe you can change it. Maybe they're not open to that, and that might be something that you kind of have to skip in future role plays when it comes to discussing past events. Sometimes things work out, sometimes they don't, but the best way is just to communicate. Now, let's backtrack a little bit because I want to talk about 2 instances of roleplay etiquette that I've seen come up lately on social media, and I feel we need to talk about them. First off, what if someone has a character concept I don't understand? What if they've tried explaining it to me and I'm just like, I'm not there in the MSQ, or I didn't do this specific obscure side quest, so I have no idea what you're talking about or what your character is about? Well, communicate. Ask them to explain the concept to you and go, hey, I understand this about your character, but I don't quite understand that about your character. Could you please explain that to me? And what you'll find is if someone has taken the time to craft this immaculate backstory or personality for their character, they will gladly explain it, maybe even longer than you wish they would. But generally speaking, if you ask for clarification from either a role player or, say, the owner of a venue, you're probably going to get it. I don't imagine many situations in which someone is or should get aggressive towards you for seeking clarification on a premise. And the other thing we need to talk about is, oh gosh, what if someone has a character concept I don't agree with or I don't like? All right, guys. I have seen this a lot on social media lately as an issue. The best thing I can tell you is please be polite about it. If someone has crafted a character and that character makes them happy, it doesn't matter if that character is sticking to the lore or they've gone, completely homebrew on the lore. If it makes them happy, don't try and mess up someone else's thing. Honestly, if if you can't agree with the way someone has crafted their character or the way someone presents their character, then don't roleplay with them. Plain and simple. Just be like, hey, I don't really agree with your concept, or I don't feel like, if you want a really diplomatic way to put it, just be like, I don't feel like I could roleplay well with your character. And you just have to leave it at that. Find other places, other people to roleplay with. If they get aggressive about it and demand clarification, then at that point you are, able to go more in depth about it. But in general, if you don't feel comfortable with someone's character, or you don't feel like you can roleplay with that character, I don't want to roleplay with you. End of story. And they should be able to accept that, and you both just move on. Done. So, with that out of the way, that was everything I had prepared. We still have about 8 minutes left. If anyone has any remaining questions, by all means, please ask. Also, I hope that everyone was able to be comfortable and had a lot of fun with this. Oh, Skitty has a question. So Skitty asks, what do you think, or maybe what has been your experience about mixing RP with aspirational or optional content? For example, say a farmer character who incorporates Island Sanctuary, or a character that is involved with the human-dragon relationship around Ishgard, doing something like... I'm not quite sure what DSR stands for, I'm sorry. Could I get a bit of clarification on that? Dragon Song Reborn, okay. Okay, I'm not a raider, so... Or Dragon Song Reprise, okay. Yeah, that is the ultimate for Heaven's Word, and that is way beyond me. Okay, so... But let's go back to the base question here. About mixing in optional content. So if you are, say, a farmer from Island Sanctuary, then that's awesome. That's part of your character, and go for it. Now, something like explaining, this is how I view how Dragon Song Reprise affected my character, that may take a bit more time to explain to your RP partner, because as you just saw, not everyone might not necessarily be used to that, but everything with roleplay goes back to explanation and going, this is my character concept, this is my partner's character concept, let's try and pair them and let's have fun. So even if you want to add in that aspirational or optional content, I say go for it 100%. And then communicate that to your RP partner and have a blast. A lot of the time you'll find that backstory really helps to shape your character, but doesn't necessarily affect too much of what happens in actual RP as it's going on. For instance, if situationally you're at a club or you're in a dungeon, you're not going to suddenly be like, oh, and by the way, I cleared Dragon Song Reprise, it's a key part of my character, and this is deeply affecting me by having to kill this Marlboro. Which if it does, don't get me wrong, that's part of your RP, go for it. But overall, a lot of the times backstory will just affect how your character relates to things. Your backstory probably, hopefully, won't have a huge impact on the people you're role-playing with, if that makes sense, hopefully. All right, we still have time for, I'd say, probably 2 more questions. The topic I was missing were those last 2 parts about etiquette in regards to talking about if someone's RP concept isn't something that you personally approve of, or something that you feel is compatible with how you view 14. And just being polite about that and either choosing a different roleplay partner or trying to talk with your roleplay partner about why perhaps role-playing that aspect of their lore may be difficult for you. And so that leaves us with one question. Super Nap Time 64 says, what is the community consensus on having characters that know/are related to canon characters? That is a wonderful question. And if there ever is a community consensus on something like that, I promise I will let you know. When it comes to things like that, then I would say that community consensus is a very tricky word to use because everyone in the RP community probably has a different stance on that. And so RP community consensus may really be down to the size of what you mean by community. Like, for instance, if you're in an RP free company, then community consensus is going to be, how does the free company view this? Or if you're at a venue, you know, how will other RPers at the venue view this? And that will likely come down to an individual basis. So that is a great question to end this panel on. And really the best way I can answer that is ask your group and see what they think about it. Ask the people you're RPing with and see what they think about it. Personally, I am very much of the mind that if you have a concept and it makes you happy and you're like, this is how I view my character, then that is your character and you should run with it. Well, with all that said, I appreciate everyone for attending. Thank you so much. I realized that we did a little bit of backtracking. I realized that this may not have been optimal for some people who are attending in person due to how I have the UI set up, but I want to thank all of you for taking an hour out of your day to listen to this and ask some really amazing questions. If you all have more RP questions or are curious about aspects of the Final Fantasy XIV community, I invite you to come find me on YouTube or social media or Spotify. But before you go with this last 30 seconds I have, I want to ask a very large favor of everyone. There is something missing from my UI, and that is the charity and donations part of this convention. I would really appreciate if, for those of you that want to and can afford it, obviously please don't place excess financial burden upon yourselves, but if you could go to Extra Life and donate for charity and give to the kiddos, exactly, Catflail, thank you, I would really appreciate it. And with that asked, I'm out. See you later, guys, and take care, and have a wonderful rest of your convention.